Hi everyone. Thank you so much for coming today. So, when I was 3 years old, my dad took me out on his boat for the first time. And he let me steer us through Eggertown Harbor. So he sat me down at the helm and I put my little hands on the steering wheel and I was pretending to drive through the harbor and I was having the time of my life. And everything was going great until a boat was coming in our direction. And my dad, he turned to me and he goes, "Victoria, this boat, you're gonna hit it, you have to steer us away." And I said, "But I wanna hit the boat, Daddy." And that was kind of my first experience with the sea, but honestly from that point on I was hooked. I loved being on the water, I loved being with my dad on the boat, and that was just kind of the start of this journey growing up on the island and being immersed in the fishing culture of Martha's Vineyard. And so from there, when I was 5 years old, I started fishing in the Martha's Vineyard Striped Bass and Bluefish Derby with my dad, and that's something that I continue to do today. I love fishing, I love being part of the Derby, and I've volunteered at the weigh station since I was in 8th grade. And working there and also just growing up surrounded in that culture has really taught me a lot about how unique the Martha's Vineyard fishing cultures are, and I really love it and I appreciate it. And so now that I'm older and a lot less destructive than I was when I was 3, I've started getting into projects that involve marine sustainability, marine biology sustainability, but also sustaining the Martha's Vineyard fishing cultures, which I love so much. So I'm going to take you on a little side note for a second, and we're going to talk about mass extinctions. So when I say those words, mass extinctions, you probably think of these guys, right? The dinosaurs, things that are sort of from the past. We don't really think about them that much. That's not something that's very present in our lives. But something that you may not know is that we're actually in the middle of a 6th mass extinction right now. So, since the Industrial Revolution, species have been going extinct every day at an increasing rate, and it's getting to be really bad. It's almost exponential, as you can see. And so we're obviously faced with a lot of crises right now. A lot of you guys are in AP Environmental Sciences, so you probably know all about this. The extinctions and global warming, how it's affecting our ecosystems around the world, and obviously that's a big problem. And so how do we combat this? Biodiversity. Biodiversity is essential to combat mass extinctions. So obviously we need to keep all the species here in order to make sure that no more species go extinct, because every organism has its own niche, its own really important role in its own ecosystem. And you might be thinking, okay, what does this have to do with us? Well, that's kind of where my capstone presentation comes in. So because I'm so interested in marine biology and fishery sustainability, I reached out to this woman, Shelley Edmondson, this year. Thea, I know you know Shelley. So basically, she's just the most wonderful, all-around, amazing person I've ever met in my life. And she works at the Martha's Vineyard Fishermen's Preservation Trust, and she agreed to be my mentor this year. And basically, I came to her and I said, I want to do a project, this is what I'm interested in, what can we do? And she introduced me to channeled whelk. And basically tying into the whole biodiversity thing, a lot of you might not know what channeled whelk are, but no species is too small or too seemingly insignificant to protect if we're trying to sustain our island and our global ecosystems. So, a little background information. This is a channeled whelk. You might think that it's a conch, but it's not a conch. That's kind of a misconception. Conch are the more tropical, large sea snails that you see. They're in the Caribbean. We, on the island here, have whelk. And they're kind of conch's cousins, and you probably have seen their shells on the beach. But something that you probably don't know is that the channeled whelk industry is actually a very important fishery on the island. And a lot of people rely on it to make a living, a lot of local fishermen. This is something that I didn't know about, but Shelley educated me about it this year. And one of the really sad things is that over the years, the whelk populations around the vineyard and in vineyard waters have started to decline. So this is a graph that's been taken from the Massachusetts Division of Marine Fisheries website. And basically, as you can see, it goes from 2000 to 2016, and this is data that they collected about the pounds of whelk per trap haul that each whelk fisherman caught in different areas of water surrounding the vineyard. So we have Nantucket Sound, Vineyard Sound, Buzzards Bay, and other areas. And what's something that you all notice about this graph? It's going down, right? Thank you, Mr. Ernest. It's going down. So yeah, basically, just like a lot of other species around the world, channeled whelk populations are starting to decline. And this obviously has an impact on our Martha's Vineyard ecosystems, but on the fishermen as well. It's really starting to hurt the fishery. A lot of fishermen are starting to suffer because of it. And so in order to combat this decline, the Division of Marine Fisheries has proposed an increase in the gauge size. Now the gauge size of a whelk is, as you can see, that measurement from like this area to that area on its shell. And basically fishermen can only keep whelk that are higher than a certain gauge size. And the idea behind this is that by protecting the smaller whelk in the populations from being harvested by fishermen, then those small whelk will have more time to develop and mature sexually so that they can eventually add more to their population. And that's all well and good, but one of the tricky things is that female whelk are actually significantly larger than males. So much so that by increasing the gauge size, fishermen would basically be forced to keep female whelk almost exclusively. And obviously that has a lot of negative implications to their populations, because what are you going to do in a population with no females? It's going to start to decline even more. And another interesting fact is that the female whelk that are the largest, females that are particularly large, actually are known to be more fertile and lay more eggs. And these are actually whelk eggs. You've probably seen those on the beaches. I didn't know that those were whelk eggs up until this year, but now you know, the more you know, right? And so basically what Shelley and I were trying to do together was find a way to protect some of these really large females that are the greatest contributors to their population. And that leads me to my capstone project, and it basically is sustaining the Martha's Vineyard channeled whelk populations and fisheries through drilling and tagging practices. So basically the project is modeled off of the lobster vnotch project. You guys probably don't know what that is, but it's an ongoing project. It was kind of booming a few years ago, where fishermen could take some of their larger females that had a lot of eggs when they caught them and brought them up on their boat, and then cut this little V-notch into its tail and then release it back. And that notch didn't hurt the animal at all, but basically it would take probably a couple of years for it to fill in. And any fisherman that subsequently caught that lobster that had a notch in its tail was legally obligated to throw it back. So that female was protected, and it could go on continuing to live in its environment and lay eggs and contribute more to its population. And so Shelley and I kind of wanted to do that with the whelk, see if we can protect some of those large female whelks that are so valuable. And so we developed our own method of V-notching them, I guess you could say. So we took 16 channeled whelk from Vineyard Waters. We got it from a fisherman. His name is Tom Turner. He's a great guy. He's been fishing on the island for decades, and he brought us these 16 large female whelk. And we decided that we were going to tag 8 of them and then leave the other 8 as a control group. So we tagged them by basically just taking a regular industrial grade drill and drilling 2 small holes into the outer lips of their shells. As you can see, it's kind of hard to see up there. And so we drilled them and we tried to make the holes as minimally invasive as possible. And then we took large yellow tags and we looped them through right there. And the tags were basically just for identification purposes. We were hoping that if this project went further, then we wouldn't need to put the tags in. We could just leave the holes. And the purpose of the study basically was to see if we could put these holes in the shells of the whelk without harming the animal. We wanted to see if it could be like the lobster V-notch, where the lobsters could go on living and reproducing totally fine. And so we kept the whelk, the 8-tagged whelk, in a large tank at the Shellfish Group headquarters in OB. And we separated the tagged whelk from the untagged whelk by a divider on the tank, and everything was the same. The water temperature, the water flow rate, and everything was totally the same, the amount of food that they each got. And we wanted to measure the movements of the whelk, see if they could still move freely around their tank after getting the holes drilled in their shells. And we wanted to just basically compare their actions to the actions of the control group. See what these holes were doing to them, see if the holes were going to kill them, if they were going to make it so that they couldn't move or they couldn't eat. So we had a very advanced setup, as you can see. This is our time-lapse camera. that we were using to film the whelk, basically 24/7, the tagged whelk, to see if they were moving around their tank, if they were going after the food, how the holes were affecting them. And so basically, we drilled the whelks in October of 2018, and we kept them in this tank at the shellfish hatchery until December. And from what we could see and from the time-lapse footage that we got, the whelks were totally fine. Something that was interesting was that none of them ate throughout the entire duration of their stay in the tanks, but that's actually not that alarming. Whelks can go for months on end without eating any food because they basically hibernate in the winter. They don't really need to feed that often. But we did offer them food. We gave them some clams, and after they didn't eat the clams, I decided to smash one of the clams to see if we could intensify the scent a little bit. They still were uninterested, but that's okay because none of the untagged ones did it either. And then we released them in December, and all of them survived, which was great. We saw from the time-lapse footage that they were able to move around their tank. We actually saw one of them climbing up the side of the tank, like almost trying to escape at one point, which was great. And basically what we were able to conclude from the duration of their stay was that the holes didn't really seem to have an effect on their ability to move, on their ability to survive. None of them died right away or anything, which was great. And we released them in the outer Vineyard Haven Harbor, and this project is ongoing. It's not over yet. And Shelly and I are planning to throw on some wetsuits pretty soon and snorkel and try to recapture our whelks, see if we can get them from the bottom of the harbor, which will be easier than you think it is because they don't move around that much. And yeah, we're going to check on the status of their survival rates. Obviously, we want to see if we can find them alive, crossing our fingers about that one, and also to check on the status of the holes themselves, because like the lobster vnotching project, those notches grow in over time. These holes are going to grow in over time. Their shells are going to grow over the holes that we drill in them, and we want to see if we can use this as a method of protecting them for a long period of time. How long are they going to be protected for? So there's still much more that we have to do, but that's basically where we are as of right now. And I'm going to pause for questions if anybody has any. Holly.
Some of these have wetsuits, that should sound good.
I think I'm all set. Thanks for the offer, though.
What are people doing with them? Are they eating them?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. So it is a big fishery on the island, like more popular than you'd expect, but over 95% of the fishermen's catches get shipped off to Asia, and they are eaten as a delicacy there. And they are eaten here too. If you go to Chef Dion in OB, he's been experimenting with a lot of whelk dishes. I'm pretty sure he just came out with a cookbook about it. So it is a pretty big food industry around the world.
Will the shell close over the tag, or will the tag
Like it would grow around the tag, but the tags are basically, we use those big yellow tags at the beginning because we knew that we were going to release them and try to recapture them. And those are basically just to make it easier for us to find them when we're snorkeling. Hopefully, if we do future trials of this and if this actually gets implemented as like a way of protecting them, then we wouldn't have to put those tags in. It would just be drilling the holes into the whelk.
local fishermen know about the project? If they catch one of these, they go to the tag, or if they spot where they're not actually fishing?
Question. So as of right now, we're still basically just trying to see if this is a feasible way of protecting them, and if hopefully when we get to the point where we can start making this a more universal practice, then we are going to be reaching out to the fishermen because we need their participation in order to make this a possibility, just like the lobster vnotch. All they would have to do is take a couple of the biggest whelks that they catch in like one trap or something and drill the holes in their shells and then just throw them back wherever, and then if anybody caught them in the future, then they would have to throw them back.
Do they tend to have drills with them, or are they going to have to?
Yeah.
They do have a drill on the boat?
Yeah, if you've ever been on a fishing boat, they have tools and stuff. It's pretty standard. So.
Has anybody else tried to mark whelks or other kinds of,
Not to my knowledge, no. This is a first, yes.
Do you stay with this project, or will someone else pick up, someone that's here?
Well, it is ongoing, and Shelly and I already have a plan for this summer what we're going to do. We're going to hopefully do more trials of this in the lab, see if like the warmer water temperatures will make the whelks more active in the summer, because as they didn't eat or anything this year, we kind of attributed that to the cold water temperatures. So we're going to be doing more trials of this and also doing more data analysis and collection on the fishing boats. So. Yeah, I'm interested in going into marine biology, and hopefully I'll be able to keep up with this next year. Trip.
Do you think that running design could become a legal thing, and if so,
that is the ultimate goal, and so basically we would need the cooperation of the Massachusetts Division of Marine Fisheries in order to implement something like that. But we're basically doing this project to prove that the whelk would be safe and that the whelk would be protected if we drilled them. And then if we can prove that and collect enough data in order to prove that, we'll show it to the Division of Marine Fisheries. We have connections there. And if they're very reasonable and they want to help the fishermen and they want to help the populations just like we do, and so if we can show them this, then hopefully they'll be on board with it and get working on a regulation.
How do you determine the holes don't affect the reproduction?
That's a good question. I mean, I guess there's not really, how do they reproduce? They have the eggs, and I've never really like seen seen it happening.
it's like a turtle, female lays the eggs, and then
Yeah, basically, yeah, it's like any other mollusk, and there's really no way to tell unless you keep the whelks in the lab during breeding season, which is something that could be done potentially.
Summer?
Yeah, spring, summer. You know, have you been on the beach in the summer and seen those egg cases when you're walking along the beach? It's around this time.
Are they unique to the vineyard, or are they worldwide?
Channeled whelk?
Yeah.
They're pretty much an East Coast sort of mollusk, I guess you could say. As I said before, they're cousins. The conch, those are down in the Caribbean. They kind of have different variations of them around the United States. Channeled whelk and knobbed whelk. We also have knobbed whelk on the vineyard. They're pretty similar to channeled whelk. You can find them around the U.S.
And how big do they get?
Well, the males are pretty much about the size of my fist. They stay pretty small. The females are much larger than the males. You'll probably see them like around yay big, kind of like enough so that you can hold them in your hand, and they can get to be probably around this size, but that's pretty much it.
So you've done this with the channel well, or do you do this with other types of wells, like other mollusks, like the conchs and stuff?
Yeah, honestly, it could be done in the Bahamas where the conchs are. You know, they've been noticing a really significant decline in the waters around there because it is a delicacy. You know, if you go down to the Caribbean, you get conch fritters. It's a very popular dish, and the fishermen have been noticing down there too that there aren't as many conchs around. It's very sad. All right. I have actually. I tried conch for the first time in my life about a week ago.
what about whelk?
What?
What about whelk?
Yes, I've tried whelk as well. It's pretty good. Should give it a try sometime. Go to Dion's. All right. Are we all set? All right. Well, basically, what I want you all to remember is that no species is too small to protect. These guys are very important to a lot of people around the island, and work is being done to try to keep them going. So thank you for coming.